Welcome to Enjoy the Journey podcast, where we interview expert entrepreneurs and thought leaders to help guide you in pursuit of financial freedom. Presented to you by Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, where we help service-based business owners remove cash flow bottlenecks, maximize their profits, and turn business profits into personal wealth. G'day guys, Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor here for Enjoy the Journey podcast. And I'm very excited today because I've got a new friend of mine, Mathias Bennett, who is the author of a new book, Confident Vulnerability. And Mathias and I were introduced on the Clubhouse platform, and through him speaking and listening to his story and what he's been able to create in this world and the amount of impact that he's focusing on delivering to the world, I wanted to get him on the podcast and unpack some of his genius so you guys can benefit. So Mathias, thanks for joining us, mate. How's things?
Thank you, Jackson. Very well.
That's great, mate. So, Mathias, give us a little bit of background. What's your story?
Well, my story is somewhat of a circuitous one. Actually, I started the late 90s in web technology. But then in college, I started out in computer science, but then I thought, you know what? I think I'd rather learn a language that I could talk to people with and it not go obsolete in 5 years. So I ended up majoring in Spanish. And then fast forward, after that led to an opportunity where I worked at Yale University for 4 years, helping language teachers use technology to teach language. Then in 2011, I asked myself, what do I truly need to be a happy human? Then I basically moved to an island off the coast of Seattle and the Pacific Northwest and slept in a tent for a year and then received these principles of leading with confident vulnerability, which I've been sharing in various ways and happy to share here.
Amazing, mate. I was drawn to your story when you talked about the tent because I'm actually about to embark on a journey of a year around Australia living in a four-wheel drive. So as soon as I hear something similar, it just connected me to your story. So what was the catalyst for you, Mathias, that led you to go on that adventure? Because I'm sure that was probably pretty scary looking into that situation.
All told, fortunately, it was not, scary. I guess some more color around that is actually a good friend of mine that I'd known for 20 years, or I guess 12 years at that point. So I moved on to his land. So it wasn't totally without resources. But I think it was really, I'd gotten to a point where it's really clear that the direction that I was going wasn't in alignment with my highest calling. And I needed to fully immerse myself into whatever was next. And I didn't really know what that was.
It's really brave, mate. I think that there's so many people who aren't willing to kind of shut the door on their life behind them without knowing what's the next opportunity that's going to present themselves. But what I've found from firsthand experience, that's sometimes where the best opportunities arise.
Yep.
So how long into that journey did you really discover what your true purpose was?
My life's purpose, actually, I wrote down several years before that, which I'd be happy to share.
Please do, mate. I'd love to hear it.
Cool. So it's in a nutshell, my life purpose is to help people discover and strengthen their connectedness with themselves, others, and the universe through my presence, creative works of all kinds, and contributing strategically to organizations working towards that same mission in alignment with the highest good of all.
That's beautiful, mate. I love that. And was that the first iteration of your life's purpose, Mathias, or has that naturally evolved through your journey since writing that a few years prior?
It's fascinating because actually I did that over a blog post from Steve Pavlina. Shout out to Steve. Thank you. It was like a click moment because when I wrote that, I had realized, holy moly, that is the thing that I've been doing all along in various ways and permutations. And it was clear that I would continue to do that through the rest of my life.
I found that I've had similar situations where I'm kind of like the last person to the party. And it's a kind of this aha moment that everyone else has known all along. It's kind of, you've been on the natural journey and then all of a sudden someone turns the lights on and you realize for yourself.
Well, and what you're saying actually it highlights something that I think is really important, especially for myself and as I see people that I support, is what are our true gifts? And oftentimes the thing that we really have to value, we don't value because we're like the fish swimming in the water, and the gifts are our kind of our water, our natural environment. It's just is how it is, and we've always done that. But being able to recognize that, oh my gosh, the secret sauce that I bring to the party is nobody else does that, or very few people do that. And so being able to have that self-awareness and that consciousness, and then the skill to be able to package that, to kind of bring that down from the soul level down into the physical world with an actionable offer, that's kind of the secret sauce.
And that's really powerful. And it's sometimes easier said than done. And I think this flows really well into the whole idea of the confident vulnerability. I think there's many business leaders that lead confidently in their wheelhouse to their strengths. However, there was a lot of lack of ownership of those vulnerable areas where they might not be so strong. So talk to me about the principles of kind of leading with confident vulnerability. What does that exactly mean to you, Mathias?
Yeah, well, to me, in a nutshell, it is to have the courage to know that you have what you truly need in every moment to achieve your visions and dreams. And especially those of us that have grown up in let's say, developed countries, there's oftentimes so much support that exists that we're able to have an exchange with people that we know, that sometimes it's not about necessarily the dollars, the money. Oh man, if I don't have this amount, then something bad is going to happen, right? So really being able to have that deeper trust, as well as reach out and create reciprocal relationships where you may not be exchanging money, but you might be able to exchange expertise or other other goods that you and this other person could need.
And I love that. I've always been a big believer in that, Mathias. I've always been the believer that you invest in a relationship without expecting anything in return. And when you give, good comes back. Do you feel that that's been enabled or disabled as a result of this COVID situation that we're in?
It's a really good question. In a way, I would say both. So one aspect of that is that it's actually creating a common shared experience for all of humanity. I could get on the phone with pretty much anybody in the world and have a shared common set of experiences. So that helps bridge our humanity. And also recognizing, oh gosh, we need the basics. We need food, we need human interaction. And yet simultaneously in let's just call it the information ecosystem, we're finding something where there's vastly different sets of information, and depending upon social media, different groups of people are getting different information, and what that's doing is that's fracturing the information landscape, such that the idea of having like the baseline of reality to say these are the facts that we're working with, those are over at risk. Let's just say that. So I think really going back to the source documentation, whatever that is, really like talking person to person, the people with individuals who might think different than you in a polarized time like this is especially critical, because the powers that want humanity to fail, let's just put it that way, that's the last thing that they want. So the best thing that you can do is like reach out, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends.
And I've really found that. I think people have come back to that. I think a lot of us were in a pretty dark place for a long while, very disconnected. And I feel that this has been the ultimate reset where we've come back to having a lot more meaningful connections, or at least I found that in the circles that I hang around with. But I think there's also a stark contrast, and there's a position where there's many people who are leading arrogantly. Which I feel that those are the kind of polar opposites of the kind of leading with confident vulnerability and then leading with a sense of arrogance.
Yeah.
So what's the cost or the risk of leading from a position of arrogance when it comes to trying to grow and scale a business in this current world?
A couple of points actually I wrote in a recent article for a leadership journal, which actually I'd be happy to send and maybe post a link in the show notes. But according to Eric Schmidt, chairman of Google and Google's co-founder, for executives that he screened out of executive positions because of their arrogance, cost those individuals $500 million each, based on what they would have made after the company went public. That's one bit. And another one is in a study of 953 CEOs, Antoinette, I think they're Riesenbilt, and Harry Comadeur found that organizations that had arrogant CEOs tended to perform worse in the stock market and were more likely to be convicted of fraud.
From your positioning, Mathias, how do you pull yourself up as a leader? Because I think sometimes we all have certain attributes as leaders of businesses where we can sometimes be arrogant. I know I've been guilty of that in the past, but I do try my best to check myself and to come back to that position that you refer to as kind of the confident vulnerability, to share your vulnerabilities, to share your weaknesses, so it makes you human. Do you feel that leaders have that ability to kind of self-calibrate intrinsically, or is this something that they need to learn or be taught?
I think it depends. And you mentioned like earlier, I see they're mainly falling into two groups. For example, leaders who are already successful, they're really confident, potentially bordering on arrogant at times maybe. And so part of what is really required is like this softening, both within themselves, maybe in parts where haven't yet been vulnerable with themselves first, and then kind of with their team and really listening and just taking that moment. On the flip side, you have, for example, individuals who may not even consider themselves leaders, who are really good at what they do, and they don't have an issue with being empathetic with others, but they haven't yet really grasped onto the confidence of really standing in their power, really being able to effectively share their gifts.
And it seems to me that this is potentially an alignment issue. That either whether you are leading with the confident vulnerability and you're doing so in a way that's congruent to your values and leading your business to its ultimate potential, or in the worst case scenario that you're an arrogant leader committing fraud and costing your business millions. How do we ensure that we create that alignment as a leader?
I think, and if I can kind of get a little bit metaphysical here, because two main aspects of my work, leading with confident vulnerability, which is kind of suitable for everyone, and then a little bit more of the metaphysics that I work with one-on-one with clients, and working with the Akashic Records, which is, I guess, since I mentioned it, it's like an energetic database of everything that's ever happened. So in a way, like metaphysics around the soul is definitely a hardball that I have. So one of the things I think that's really helpful is to really make sure that there's an alignment between the soul level, between the mental level, and also the body or action. And then even flowing from the individual, that there's an alignment between like the business, like the individual or the founder with the business, and then also with the market. And so depending upon where somebody's at, they might have a blockage in one of those places. So for example, let's say business is going great, and you've got a really great market fit, but gosh, your soul feels kind of empty, right? Then that could be that everything from the mind all the way down through to the market is just going gangbusters, but there's that blockage between the soul and the mind. Alternatively, if there's someone who really is tuned in, they're super spiritual, they're all about the sage and crystals. I like to poke fun at some of my new age friends here on Maui. The idea of like the market fit, or even like a clear concept of going from the spiritual level and being able to share their gifts and put that into a package that then someone can say yes to, that's not quite there yet. So that there might be that kind of blockage in that area. So those are a couple of maybe scenarios that
makes sense.
Helps illustrate that.
100%. I think the big part of this, Matthias, what I pull out of this is that it's about balance across all. Because I think that even myself, I was never into the woo-woo. I didn't believe in it. And I was a very objective, strategic person in my earlier entrepreneurial days. But I find there were certain situations that it didn't matter how much fact and how much strategy you threw at something, you just couldn't push your way through it. And I'd always question as to why. And I had a really phenomenal coach who helped me do some mindset work around NLP and some of the metaphysics stuff. And I just approached it with an open mind, some healthy skepticism, and everything started to change. I'm a convert and I believe in this. So I expect you probably run up against a lot of people like that probably have a healthy skepticism, and some of them are hugely skeptical. How do you help them realize the potential that they're leaving on the table in these more kind of woo-woo, new age style strategies?
I guess the short answer is I don't. And the reason is that you going back to alignment and energy, like attracts like. So I don't have an interest in trying to convince someone who is not ready to have that conversation of the efficacy of maybe these higher woo-woo things of tuning into your spirit, tuning into your soul purpose, your vision, your values. But when somebody is ready, then I know that I can help them.
Makes a lot of sense. And some people who are listening to this might see this as a surprise because you've spoken about your time at Yale and working in academia. I guess a lot of this stuff is not potentially in that kind of academic world as such. So where did you start to see the potential of this other alternative style holistic approach?
So this was a kind of the parallel tracks going back. Actually in 2009, I learned how to read the Akashic Records, and I was definitely called to it. I was clear that this is what Spirit was calling me to do. And interestingly, I actually was I guess you could say, an elder in our church. I had grown up in this, Christian church in many different denominations. And I felt like that this was something that I needed to do. And actually, so I felt like, all right, I'd rather do this. Feel God is going to call me to do, as opposed to not do it because I'm afraid of what people are going to think. So I did that. And actually that was the kind of a key to unlock huge, massive spiritual downloads about who I was, who I am, and why I'm here on the planet. So that was really back in 2009, that training. And also I see that now, sometimes there were no other substances involved. Often I've definitely seen a number of people who are taking different kinds of plant medicine where it can initiate and trigger those kind of expanded spiritual awarenesses and states.
I see the potential in it. Like I wish that if more people did this kind of work, that I think the world would be a better place and people would reach in their fullest potential. There'd be a whole lot more change that occurs, good, positive change. Mm-hmm. What do you feel is at stake here, Mathias, with people who are willing to kind of show up and share their values, whether it be in their business or in life in general, and kind of playing that bigger game, looking at this more holistically?
In a sentence, I think the world is at stake. So not to get too heavy, but I think we're at a time where what's required is to really step up as courageously as possible, regardless of where we are, what country we're living in. And to step up to support and be in alignment for truth, be in alignment and a stand for freedom, and be in alignment and a stand for doing what we're called here to do on the planet. From a metaphysical standpoint, I mean, we really as souls, we chose to be here at this time. So this is like the last minute in so many different ways of this drama that's played out on Earth over thousands and thousands of years. And the last minute meaning, we don't necessarily know the time. It could be 10, 20, or even 100 years. And of course, the future will continue, right? But we're really at a critical junction. And so I think the opportunity is to not shrink back, to take those actions, but at the same time, even in the midst of taking those actions, have take things with a grain of salt and don't stress out too much and just, self-nurture, take a little humor and say, oh, okay, isn't this interesting?
I love this, mate. I think this is where people can unlock their fullest potential. I think there are a lot of lost souls, people who are kind of going through life without aligning with their true purpose. And with some assistance and support from a facilitator like yourself, I think that people can really get congruent to those values and lead their lives and their businesses in a way that is congruent to those values. So, Mathias, talk to me a little bit about how you work with your clients. Firstly, who's an ideal client for you?
Well, an ideal client is an entrepreneur, is an innovator, someone who's clear that they are here to bring something new onto the planet. Oftentimes they are spiritually in tune, spiritually aware, and depending upon where they are in their journey, they may have already received massive downloads about that and are trying to integrate things and kind of connect the spiritual stuff that they've received, the information, with perhaps the skills that they have built over years or maybe even decades. So I definitely am someone who could come in and work with someone to help connect, help integrate, and align, them and their business for what they're here to do.
And if people do want to get in touch with you, Mathias, how is the best way for them to connect with you?
Well, the best way would, I can post some links down here, but you can check out actually what I was going to mention is I also created a process to help anyone create their life's purpose. So that can be used by individuals and also for companies or groups. And I'm actually excited. I'm in conversation with two companies right now about putting that in their platform and sharing that with their audience.
Beautiful.
So that's yourlifepurposenow.com. And I think I'll also include a link to that article about leading with confident vulnerability that I talked about earlier.
Amazing, mate. So anybody who's listening to this, if you resonate with what Mathias has said, if it sounds like what you need, make sure that you jump on those links. You're going to get a tremendous amount of value. So Mathias, if you had to give your kind of parting points of wisdom, what would be a couple of key takeaways that you could share with our audience for them to implement from what we've spoken about today?
Yeah. So commitment is a natural consequence of alignment. When you are fully aligned, commitment will just naturally flow. Somebody else might see you and say, man, that guy's committed. But in your experience, you're not thinking, oh, I'm so committed. You're just having a ball, right? The other one is just have that trust, have that courage. If there's one takeaway from all the work, the upcoming book and everything, is just having the courage to do what you know you need to do anyways, and be the change you wish to see in the world.
Beautiful, mate. It's always a pleasure chatting with you, Mathias. You always deliver so much value with such a unique and really simple way that you go about it that makes it so attainable for everyone. As a mate, I really appreciate you taking the time to jump on our podcast. Guys, make sure that from our conversation today, if anything we've spoken about does add value to you and you do want to take that to the next level, please reach out to Mathias. Mate, thanks for making the time and looking forward to catching up again soon.
Thank you, Jackson.